What's the most elaborate way you've cheated on an exam? My HS, we used to have 2 yearly pay exams consisting of push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, etc. Obviously not everyone was at the same level physically, so in order to pass you just had show improvement and score better on the second exam. I figured simple enough, and ended up doing like 4 of each, pretended to struggle, instead of actually trying on the first exam. You might think, well done. But to my surprise, I was the only one in my class who actually thought of it. My friends wanted to show off for some macho reason, and went all out on the first try. Some of them fell short on the second exam, and ended up failing the class. We were sitting our exams in South America, and we had the same papers as the Australian kids. Now for some reason the Cambridge Examination Board, who runs the exams, didn't consider it necessary to have 2 different exams for the different time zones in the southern hemisphere, while they did for the northern one. So we had the same papers as the Australian kids, and a 15-hour time zone difference. Now, we were stupid kids and didn't really think about the possibilities, until we went on a forum that had the most recent past papers, and where my friends and I came to know a bunch of Australian and Sicilian kids. And then our tiny little brains did the math. We were sitting almost exactly the same subjects, and so we knew we had the same papers. We set up the contacts via email, and ended up having all the questions to the exams about 3 to 4 hours before our own exams. We got a asterisk on every subject and a friend got the best mark in the world for the history paper. Great success. Wherever you Australian and Sicilian kids are, may whatever deity you believe in bless you. I had a terrible physical science teacher in high school, and only a few really smart honor students knew anything on his tests, which were all 5 questions and multiple choice, but very complicated answers. So we came up with this group system, where we would glance at one another and scratch our face with 3 fingers indicate problem number 3, and then cough, if the answer was A. Tap the desk for B, etc. The entire classroom was in on it, and if we all got good grades on the test we would buy the genius kids a la carte at lunch. I was always the good kid in school, never got caught doing anything wrong, good grades and always obedient. This led to the teachers believing that I would never do anything wrong ever. This led to me being confident that I would never get caught, so I slowly began asking others around me for help during exams. Even if the teacher saw or heard something they always assumed that, since it was me, it would just be me borrowing something. Slowly I started carrying small pieces of paper and erasers with answers written on them to exams and still no suspicion. Finally during an history exam I carried 3 whole A4 size sheets with me to the exam. We had those tables with a slot underneath to keep your stationery. Halfway through the exam the teacher suddenly decides to conduct a surprise check. I sit there almost peeing my pants thinking that if I make any sudden movements this whole game is over. So I pretend to be completely immersed in writing the exam. The teacher comes close to me, looks at me, and says there's no way / you / Leah football is copying, and moves on to the next guy. The whole class knew I was copying and everyone was giving me death glares. I just thanked my luck and put those papers in my underwear as soon as I was sure the teacher wasn't looking, and never did that again. So in one class at uni we were required to take a 2-hour written final, supplying our own blue book, something you buy at the bookstore. Well, the professor decided to give us our topic question in order to better prepare for this 2-hour write sesh. Bought 2 blue books, perfected one at home, and brought a blank to class. I drew pictures in class for 2 hours, put it in my backpack, and when walking to the front of the class to turn in I pulled my extremely revised blue book out and turned it in. In first grade we had spelling tests. We were told to put up binders so nobody would cheat off our papers. I wrote the hardest words down on the inside of the binder and made it to the spelling bee where I failed spectacularly. It was a tough class, so I wore a hood every single day. When exam time came I recorded the notes on my iPad and played them during the exam through my headphones, which were hidden in my hood. It wasn't suspicious at all to the teacher because I wore my hood every day. I still failed the exam. I flattened out a paper clip and taped it to my forearm. Mounted a piece of Bristol board with formulas and notes on it with tape and string which allowed it to slide along the length of my arm. Attached a little handle to the side of the paper closest to my palm, and shoved a little metal hook made out of a paper clip to my pencil eraser. The contraption was nicely concealed under my baggy sweater. I was able to slide it out using my eraser hook to my palm and push it back in when needed. It took the duration of an hour during lunch break to make this, in which time I could have just memorized the formulas. I was just really intrigued by this idea. Didn't work as great as I expected, but gave me a solid pass on the test. Not really that creative, but really funny. My 11th grade history teacher was really old and kind of deaf, but she and her husband basically helped found the school, so they could never get let go. Anyways, my whole class found out that, as long as you don't look like you're cheating, it's totally possible to cheat by talking at normal volume. It must have looked so ridiculous if someone walked into our classroom and see everyone looking down at their papers while talking to each other about the answers at normal volume. Exam. Memorize the letters beforehand on the poster that they'd ask you to read out loud while covering one eye at a time. It was a bad idea. I'm German and I did an English bilingual A level, so I had all kinds of subjects in English, history, biology, politics, etc. During exams we were allowed to use the school's dictionaries. There were mostly new ones, but one of them was particularly old and fucked up. The day before the exam I would go to the library and taped all the information I needed into the dictionary. When the exam started, the teacher would roll in the table with all the dictionaries. Everyone rushed to get a new one, while I chilled and always got my prepared piece of crap. Since the dictionaries came from the teacher, they would never expect I cheat with their material. Never got caught in the 5 years I did this. Get this, the teacher, what an idiot, the teacher gave me the answers. Fucking dumbass just headed them out over the course of a couple weeks before the test. I couldn't believe it. All I did was write them down, memorize them, and boom, got an A. Final exam in high school calculus. Teacher assigned 90 practice problems and picked 15 for the final test. Friend does all practice problems and enters answers in the program section of the calculator. Friend transfers answers to my calculator. I catch wind that the teacher clears all calculator memory before test, so I borrow a friend's calculator that was clear. Sit down in my desk, tuck my cheating calculator in my pants, and keep clear calculator on the desk. Teacher checks calculator and moves on. I switch calculators and A+. Answers written all over my thighs. Short skirt, dark tights that you can see through when you stretch them. Because what's a prof going to do? Tell a girl to take off her clothes? When I was in school, everybody carried those notebooks with clear pockets on the outside, decorated with pictures of friends and whatnot. On exam days I would create secret codes, acronyms, etc. that served as ways to remember the answers and disguise them as quote/inside jokes with friends, and write them all decoratively so they looked like notebook decorations, hidden in plain sight. When I took APA's history in high school, we were required to memorize info about the US presidents, which compounded over the course of the year. The first test, we had to memorize the presidents in order. Then the next test, we had to memorize their party affiliations, etc. So come the week of the second test, I already have the presidents memorized in order, and just need to get their parties down. Essentially, I realized that you could label all Democrats, or Democrat Republicans, as a one and label all the other party, be it Whig or Republican, or whatever, with a 0. Then I just had to memorize the Seamsaka, when the Whigs disbanded, and Republicans started getting elected, and a few outliers, like Washington, etc. And the rest was a string of ones and zeros. Of course, a long string of ones and zeros converts into a much shorter, memorizable string of base 10 numbers, and we were allowed to have scrap paper on the test for the essay questions. So I wrote down the presidents in order, regurgitated my base 10 number, converted it into binary during the exam, and applied it to the list, remembering a few exceptions and outliers.